Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana was sitting on the couch, hugging her legs in her lap, watching her favorite TV show. Well, like watching TV, there was some flickering going on the screen. But the woman did not particularly get into the essence of the plot. Her thoughts were now very far away, wandering the streets of the resort town where she and Ethan had been so happy. Last summer, he had held her hand and looked at her and smiled and smiled. That charming smile of his that made Adriana's heart sink sweetly every time. This year, they planned to repeat that trip, but it did not work out. Ethan was no longer in Adriana's life and never would be. Although at first, the woman believed and hoped that her beloved would come to her senses, come back, and she would certainly forgive him. After all, his absence was causing Adriana almost physical pain. It took months for the woman to come to terms with the separation. And had she? Ethan's sweater still lies on a shelf in her closet. Sometimes she pulls it out, hugs it, buries her face in the floor, trying to capture the residual scent of the thing's owner, and then feels silly and worthless. The last cupboard still holds his mug. As he leaves, Ethan has taken almost all of his things. Some of the leftovers Adriana immediately threw out in a fit of anger. But she kept the sweater and the mug. She didn't know what for. But as long as these items were in her apartment, there was the illusion that Adriana was not alone. Adriana's childhood was spent in a small regional town. It resembled a village of low houses, dusty streets, and vegetable gardens. After school, she had to go to the nearest big city to study. Adriana had always planned for higher education. She wanted to become an economist. But where she was born, there were only a few colleges. Her parents paid her daughter's rent. For all 5 years of her schooling, they were generally wonderful. Always supportive, always understanding. At one time, Adriana had enough to feel happy and secure. But now, as a grown woman, she realized that her mother and father could not replace the whole world and could not shield her from all her troubles and misfortunes. They can't even be told about everything that happens in her life. They will get upset. They will worry. And at their age, that's no use. Adriana told her parents dryly that she had broken up with Ethan. She didn't tell them the reason, and she didn't say a word about the heartache and pain that had befallen her because he was gone. It was a decision we made together. Our relationship had exhausted itself. That was the explanation. My mother, of course, was upset. She was sure that her daughter would soon marry and have children that her caring grandparents would be happy to babysit. Her father said a few swear words to Ethan and added that he had never liked the guy. Adriana called her parents every day to check on her health and just to hear native voices, to feel that she was not alone in this unprecedented world. And once a month, she was sure to get out to her native, cozy nest. There she would turn back into a happy, loved, carefree child. After Ethan left in a moment of utmost despair, when tears wouldn't stop flowing from her eyes, and her heart would clench with longing and awareness of the inevitability of the situation, Adriana tried to remind herself that there were many good things in her life. For example, not all adult children's parents have such warm, trusting relationships with their mothers and fathers. There are so many ugly stories around, aren't there? And Adriana also has a job she loves, a close-knit, friendly team. Interesting job, more than decent wages. But with his personal life is not working out, of course. But it does not happen that everything is perfect. Adriana is already 38 years old, but she does not look her age, so everyone says from nature slim. Thanks to trips to the fitness center, trim and graceful. Beautiful long hair, big brown-green eyes. Adriana herself was well aware that she was lucky with her looks. Men always looked back at her, ever since she was in her early 20s, and finally stopped looking like an ugly teenager. Yes, Adriana was late in growing up and shaping up. Mom said it runs in the family, but she also grew old later than her peers. During university, Adriana thought only about lectures and exams. Her parents had set her up that way. No boyfriends, no nightclubs, just hard study. The result was a red diploma and an offer of a high-paying job at a major oil company. Talented students were taken apart by employers immediately after exams. Adriana was pleased with herself. Her 5-year work more than paid off and gave remarkable results. Since then, she is confident that she is capable of achieving anything she wants. Patience and persistence are key. This rule has worked without fail for professional achievements. Adriana quickly climbed the career ladder. She was trusted more and more responsible work, which of course had an impact on the salary. But as for her personal life, one disappointment followed another. Of course, the pretty young girl was noticed. Adriana understood that. She liked the interested, admiring glances, the compliments. All this she had not had before. And so now, having grown up, Adriana was taking what was hers. She often went on dates, except that she was quickly disappointed with her suitors. Guys seemed interesting and appealing to her at first. But as they got to know each other, Adriana became unpleasant. Some repelled by an overbearing character, some by terrible manners, and some even by such a trifle as the wrong accentuation in the words. Some suitors seemed too dull and boring, others too well-to-do adventurers. Some potential suitors did not know how to earn money at all. They lived with their parents, settling for a small salary. It wasn't that Adriana was mercenary. It's just that at her young age she had already managed to become head of a department and even got a small but comfortable apartment of her own. True, she had to pay the mortgage, but still she expected from her life partner at least financial independence. Her mother reassured her daughter, saying that she would find a prince for her too. "You're a smart, beautiful girl. You make good money. You're a real princess. Of course, it's hard to find a match for you, but that's okay. There are a lot of decent young men in the world. But with decent young men, for some reason it didn't work out. No luck." In front of Adriana's eyes, wonderful couples were forming. Her acquaintances were getting married, but she was still quiet on the personal front. Out of desperation, Adriana still had a serious affair with a man she didn't particularly like. They even lived together in his apartment for a while. But one day Adriana just packed up and left. She could no longer stand the uncomfortable Michael, who annoyed her with everything, and how he ate and how he played his games on the computer, and even how he wiped his glasses. Michael tried to win her back. He called, sent bouquets with touching messages and declarations of love. But Adriana remained cold and indifferent. And now she found herself in Michael's shoes. Could it be that the proverbial boomerang has returned? Whatever the case, Adriana understood Michael very well now. He must have been hurt then too. But in the end, things worked out well for Michael. He married soon after the breakup with Adriana, and now he was raising either 2 or 3 children. An exemplary family man, a happy man. But what's in store for Adriana? Of course, it's too early to tell, but it looks like a lonely, cold old age lies ahead. I mean, she's in her late 40s and she's still single. I don't think that's going to work. And Adriana, since childhood, has dreamed of a happy and strong family like her parents and children. She really wanted at least 2, but she could have more. She has so much unspent love and tenderness. She would give it all to her child and husband now. There is no one else around. Except for the sweater Ethan accidentally left in the closet, Adriana can't even get a cat. She was found to be allergic to cat hair, and the dog needs to be walked every day. Does Adriana have a job? And frequent business trips too. Ethan. Adriana still remembered in detail the day they had first seen each other. It was the height of summer, bright sunshine, and hot weather. Adriana had just returned from the Black Sea coast. She was vacationing with her mother. She decided to give her relative a gift and at the same time to spend a whole week with her parent, a chocolate, even beautiful tan, covered the whole body of a young woman. This shade of skin incredibly suited Adriana, made her look like a photo model of Hispanic origin. Adriana was well aware of this, which is why she emphasized the tan with light-colored blouses and skirts. During her vacation, there were minor changes in the office. The chief concluded a contract with a new supplier of drinking water. Adriana was used to the former delivery men, 2 scowling and taciturn men, changing from week to week, so she was a little surprised to see a stranger in her office. Adriana came back from a meeting. There was a guy standing with his back to her. He was fiddling with a heavy bottle, trying to set it in an even position. Adriana noted the strong biceps and athletic figure of the water delivery man. She involuntarily admired his movements, nimble and confident. And she noticed the stranger's surprisingly thin and aristocratic fingers. Adriana was glad that Betty, with whom she shared an office, was now absent and could not see her colleague openly admiring this man, or else she would torture her with her jokes that he was already bothering her before the trip, teasing her about going with her mother. "You'll never find anyone like that," she assured her, and Adriana countered that she didn't need anyone. Though in reality, of course, that wasn't true. And then Ethan felt someone enter, turned around, and Adriana realized she was lost. By the time she was 32, she had learned to react calmly to the looks and attention of men. But then she flashed to the roots of her hair. Like a young girl, she became embarrassed and lowered her eyes, realizing that she was being silly. Adriana walked to her seat and hid behind the monitor. God, what were his eyes like? Birch lakes framed by short, thick black eyelashes on his tanned face. They looked fantastic. He also smiled at her with a duty, polite smile. But how it adorned the already pleasant face with regular features, as if lightened. Adriana managed to notice the dimples that formed on the cheeks of the young man. "Hello," said the boy, turning to the monitor, behind which Adriana disappeared. "Hello. I haven't seen you here before. You're new here." Adriana finally dared to look at the person she was talking to. The second impression from the stranger's eyes was no less strong. "I am new." She smiled. "You must be new here, mustn't you?" "Yeah," the guy agreed. "We're new to the office." "You're right. My name is Ethan, by the way." And he held out his hand to her. It was a simple, natural gesture that seemed to break the invisible barrier between them. Adriana shook the hand happily and introduced herself. "And you are very beautiful." With disarming directness, Ethan declared. He looked at Adriana carefully. His eyes were filled with a look of obvious interest. Adriana melted under that gaze and thanked her lucky stars that just today she looked so well. And the tan and pale sundress emphasized her slender figure and her loose brown hair. "Thank you for the compliment." Adriana smiled and pretended to go back to work. In fact, she wouldn't have had anything on her mind right now. She absent-mindedly drummed her fingers on the keys, pretending to be busy because Ethan's presence and closeness made her very uncomfortable. It made her feel lost, but it didn't mean she had to break up with him. Ethan went back to his business too. There was silence in the office, and then Betty appeared. She smiled at Ethan with a beaming smile. He complimented her. Betty laughed out loud. And then Adriana felt a pang of jealousy right in her heart. How could it be? Ethan was the one who was interested in her. Why was he messing with Betty now? Adriana sensed Ethan's interest in her. Was it just an impression? Was Ethan a regular ladies' man who flirted with everyone he saw? But then he looked at Adriana. That put all doubts to rest. His gaze was one of admiration and interest. He wanted to say something to her, but the presence of Betty got in the way. Ethan left and said goodbye to the girls. Adriana was bitterly disappointed. She wished it had never ended. He's there. He's looking at her with that studying look of his. And her heart is pounding so fast, it seems ready to jump out of her chest. "Have you seen how cute he is?" Betty asked as Ethan left. His replacement isn't anything like the two old men before him either. Adriana smiled weakly and nodded. Ever since then, she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's turquoise eyes and his charming smile. Adriana remembered the way he looked at her, and her heart began to beat in a very serious rhythm. And Adriana was also waiting for the end of the week Friday. That was when she would probably see Ethan again. But on Friday, another guy was changing the bottles at the cooler. He was even prettier. Just the model on the cover of Betty magazine was blatantly staring at the worker and flirting with him. But Adriana wasn't interested in this handsome guy. She wanted Ethan, just Ethan. He showed up the next week. This time Betty was in the office, so Adriana behaved discreetly. Betty had a sharp tongue. If she sees something, she'll torture her with her jokes and innuendos. Ethan still threw those looks at Adriana. full of interest and admiration. This time he was more serious and collected, not talking to the girls, hardly paying attention to the jokes and remarks. The guy looked a little sad, and that suited him incredibly well, too. After handling the bottle, Ethan walked over to Adriana's table. Her palms were even sweating with excitement, just so he didn't notice the impression he was making on her. "May I speak to you for a moment?" he said quietly. "Yes, of course." Adriana stepped back from the report and looked Ethan in the eye. In fact, she knew right away. That look in his eyes, it was more eloquent than 1,000 words. The girl's heart fluttered joyfully. Ethan liked her, it was obvious. Adriana could not hold back a happy smile. "Show me where the technical department is, please." Adriana realized that this was just an excuse. An excuse to be alone without prying eyes and ears. Yes, of course, she nodded and rose from her seat. Out of the office, Ethan immediately took Adriana's hand gently and firmly. It was as if lightning pierced her from that touch. She felt as if she were behind a stone wall. Ethan was so strong, so confident, so reliable. He led her up the stairs to the technical floor. It was always quiet and deserted in front of the attic. The perfect place for a private conversation. "I really like you." Ethan looked at Adriana and smiled. There was so much hope in his gaze. She liked the boy's directness. Adriana could barely restrain herself from immediately throwing herself into his warm embrace. "I've been thinking about you all week. You're very beautiful, and I don't know how to explain it. Warm, sincere, pure, not like the others. I have never met anyone like you." These sincere, pleasant words made Adriana dizzy. She suddenly realized that she was smiling broadly. Her look and smile must have made it clear to Ethan himself. "Can I ask you out on a date and hang out sometime?" Of course, Adriana nodded. "With pleasure." Ethan seemed to blossom at these words. And it was so nice to see that your agreeing to a date made a person so happy. They began to date. Adriana and Ethan, with him she was fun, easy, and relaxed. Ethan always knew how to bring a smile to Adriana's face, even in the most difficult situations. He managed to cheer her up. Hugs, kisses, appropriate jokes. And now all the problems seemed like nothing. Of course, the so-called social inequality was a little tense. Ethan was a simple laborer at a water distribution firm. He had graduated from construction college after 9th grade. But he had never worked in his profession and never wanted to study again. Despite his lack of education, Ethan was remarkably erudite, even wise. Literate speech, sharp mind, innate sensitivity. What could he do? Not everyone is lucky in life. Ethan was unlucky to be born into a large family in a remote village. Considering his start, he still had a lot going for him. Ethan had clearly worked on himself to become the man he was today. Adriana was well aware of this and appreciated the merits of her beloved. Betty and some of the other girls at work called Ethan and Adriana's relationship a mésalliance. He wasn't your level. Trying to get through to Betty's friend. "Yeah, he's handsome. I can't argue with that. But don't you realize he's just using you?" Exactly. Kathy from next door joined in. "Believe me, we know better. He's on your back. He lives for free in your apartment. You take him to resorts, and he works where it's easier. He's pretending to be very active. He's not trying to achieve anything, to grow, to develop. He's happy as he is. He's pretty happy with his life." Yeah, Ethan was living in Adriana's apartment. What's wrong with that? Did she have her own place? He didn't. They love each other. So what's the problem? Ethan did change jobs often, and it was always in jobs that were not particularly prestigious or well-paid. He would get a job as a driver at a bakery, a job as a security guard, a job as a handyman in a shop or something like that. What to do? A man with no higher education didn't have many options. Ethan was looking for a better, more profitable place. What is there to reproach him for? Yes, Adriana has many times more income, and she is able to pay for a trip to the sea for the man she loves. Who cares about that anyway? Let Kathy and Betty live as they see fit. Both are married and have children. So let them raise their children, not hers, not Adriana. They don't understand that Ethan makes Adriana feel loved, beautiful, ethereal. Kathy and Betty cannot explain that even years after meeting Ethan, Adriana has goosebumps running down her spine from his touch. The special look of the man she loves makes her the happiest woman on earth. Of course, Ethan and Adriana have quarreled, but how else? It happens to all couples. It's normal. Most of the disagreements were due to Adriana's jealousy. She kept thinking that Ethan might meet a new girl at another job, just like he had once done with her. He was so handsome, so charming. Adriana had seen the ladies of all ages staring at him. Each time, Ethan assured Adriana that he loved only her, that he didn't need anyone else. He looked at Adriana in those moments, and she couldn't help but believe him. Yes, Ethan wasn't making much money. Yes, he couldn't give Adriana expensive gifts. But he supported her in all difficult situations. A quarrel with a friend or her parents, trouble at work, a conflict on the street or in a store. Ethan always took Adriana's side, even if she was objectively wrong. And that gave such power, such energy. Adriana and Ethan's relationship went through a serious crisis. One day in their first year together, Adriana realized she was expecting a baby. She was in her 30s at the time. Most of her peers had been raising children for a long time, so the news turned out to be happy for Adriana. Except Ethan took it all very differently. It's early, baby. It's very early, he shook his head. Why? Adriana was surprised. She had already imagined herself and Ethan strolling through the park with the stroller. The woman had always dreamed of having children. Well, you see, I'm not ready for such a step. Not ready at all, Ethan admitted. With my head down, I won't be able to give you and the baby the things you... There will be less money, and the child needs so many things. I have parents. They'll be supportive, Adriana assured me. I can't do that. The boy shook his head. Just imagine how it would look. A whole family around old people's necks. I'd feel like a worthless loser. Do you understand? Adriana understood. Of course, Ethan in this situation is not to be envied. And he has a right to decide too. And she made a mistake, which she later regretted more than once, and even cried into her pillow from hopelessness and inability to go back and replay everything. Adriana ended her pregnancy. She was already critically pregnant. The surgery didn't go very well. Adriana acquired health problems that practically put an end to her future motherhood. Ethan was there for her. He consoled, comforted, supported, hugged Adriana tightly, and held her in his warm embrace for a long time. And the woman stood her ground, realized that for the sake of the man she loved next to her, she was ready to endure even more than that if that was the price for happiness. So be it. Ethan and Adriana were together for 6 long years. True, they never formalized their relationship. They both considered a stamp in the passport to be an insignificant detail. Everything was perfect between them anyway. Their marriages were falling apart before their eyes. Neither the presence of children nor their official status as a unit of society saved them. An idyll reigned between Adriana and Ethan, and the woman knew there was credit to both of them. Of course, the old passion had subsided. It gave way to mutual understanding to accept the kinship of souls. Only later it became clear that it was all an illusion. Adriana had invented the perfect Ethan, and he, it turns out, had really taken advantage of her. Her friends were right. When did Adriana's eyes open? She realized that Ethan was really settling in nicely under her roof, saving on rent, groceries, entertainment, easily accepted from a woman in love with him. Expensive gifts. And then, when he found a better option, easily left her. How banal that is. In Adriana's mind often flashed the phrase, "And yet I gave him the best years." But the woman never said it out loud. She sounded too theatrical. Ethan announced his departure in a casual tone. He didn't seem upset or guilty, as if the whole thing was a matter of course. Or maybe Ethan honestly thought so, most likely. "Adriana, I'm leaving," Ethan replied. At the woman's questioning glance, and proceeded to put sweaters, jeans, into his suitcase on wheels. Papers quickly and deftly, without the slightest hesitation. Where to? Confused Adriana, "It is not important." The man answered calmly, "The main thing is that it is over between us. Thank you for everything. It was a wonderful time." Why? Everything flows, everything changes. In front of Adriana's eyes, her comfortable, warm, familiar world was crumbling. In her soul, something unimaginable was happening. Emotions of monstrous power came and went like waves on the shore. Adriana suddenly felt physically ill, dizzy. She slowly settled right down on the floor. "But let's dispense with the theatrics," Ethan threw in irritably. He walked away. Adriana couldn't believe for a long time that this had really happened. There hadn't even been any preconditions, or hadn't she noticed? She preferred to close her eyes. Ethan started staying late at work and going out on weekends, but that was understandable. He'd taken a job at a construction company almost by trade, new responsibilities, a new place to get into all the time he needed. Hence the overtime. No other changes seemed to have occurred. To be left without what was once thought to be a shoulder to lean on. It was scary. Adriana still loved Ethan. She loved him just as she had in the first days after she had met him. Adriana was used to having someone she could always count on. Ethan supported her in all kinds of situations, always finding the right words. His light touch, a couple of words, and all problems receded. He and only he could make her smile at any time. And how was she now without him? From common acquaintances, Adriana later learned why Ethan had left. It turned out that he was having an affair with the head of his department, a single adult woman, a very rich lady, who drove an expensive foreign car and lived in her own house located in an elite village. It is unlikely that Ethan liked the inner world of this boss. Clearly, he left for a beautiful life, even more beautiful and prosperous than the one Adriana could provide him. "Alphonse, he is an ordinary man. You're Ethan." Adriana reassured Betty, the very colleague in front of whom their acquaintance had once taken place. "But everyone saw that he was taking advantage of you. Only you didn't want to notice anything." Betty was quoting Adriana's father almost verbatim. He was of the same opinion, and he'd voiced these thoughts even back when his daughter and Ethan were still together. It was only a pity it took him so long to show his true face. She shook her head. "Betty, you were together for 6 years for 6 years. If it hadn't been for Ethan, you would have found a decent young man and started a family long ago." But Adriana didn't want any other man. Her heart was drawn to Ethan. How bad it was without him. How dreary. At first, Adriana called him, texted him. She left long voicemails, begged him to come back, to come to her senses, to behave like Michael. Once Ethan ignored her, Adriana texted him again and again, feeling humiliated, broken, and betrayed. But in that moment, she was really ready to forgive the unfaithful man and accept him back. Adriana longed for him to come back. And so it had been 6 months since Ethan had left. Adriana had calmed down a bit. Now a gray, dreary longing lived in her heart. The pain was returning, but only sometimes it no longer tortured and tormented her relentlessly. There was no longer any hope of Ethan's return. Adriana seemed to have let him go, but she was clearly aware that she had come out of this relationship deeply traumatized and would never be the same again. Betty and other friends advised Adriana to go to a bar, get drunk, meet someone, or at least register on a dating site. Why? Adriana asked them tiredly. If even the best of men turn out to be such traitors, it's better to live alone. It's quieter, more reliable, less pain, less disappointment. The best of men curved their lips contemptuously. Betty is Ethan. This one's your best. Everybody knew who he was but you. You see, so I don't know how to pick men. Adriana smiled sadly. So you shouldn't even try. No, Adriana wasn't ready for a new relationship. Not yet. Yes, she was 40 in 2 years. Yes, the deadline is pressing. It's probably too late to dream of a happy marriage and motherhood. So what now? Throw yourself on the first guy you meet, as in a maelstrom with his head. No, better to wait it out, sit it out. That's why she was worried. She spent her evenings alone in front of the TV. As long as she wasn't hugging Ethan's sweater. And she thought and thought and thought. thinking about how tomorrow was Saturday, a legal day off. She would be able to spend the whole day at home, not going out, not talking to anyone, not pretending that everything was okay. Such is her happiness now. We should try to replace the faucet in the bathroom tomorrow. It's leaking. Adriana has already bought a new tap. She has seen some educational videos on the web, and it seems that Ethan has done this sort of thing before. But there is nothing that Adriana cannot do on her own. The morning began with a cup of strong, fragrant coffee to her favorite soap opera. After that, Adriana headed for the bathroom. At first, things were going well. The woman twisted a couple of screws. They came out easily, like butter. She didn't even have to use force. But then, right out of the wall, from where the faucet was attached to it, cold water gushed out. In a mighty stream, Adriana was immediately pelted from head to foot. She felt cold at once. Unpleasantly, she wanted to change her clothes, but there was no time to wait. Some of the water poured like a torrent into the tub, and some poured directly onto the floor. At this rate, the whole apartment would soon be flooded, and not just her apartment. What's most unpleasant is that Adriana had a panic attack. Call a plumber. But it's the weekend. What to do in such a catastrophic case? She should have thought ahead and forced major scenarios. Adriana grabbed the towels and plates she could get her hands on and threw them on the bathroom floor. Let the water soak them for now. It would delay the moment when it started to seep down. The woman jumped out of the apartment. She had to call one of the neighbors right away. The men, of course, they would prompt and help. Adriana called one apartment, then another. No one answered. It was Saturday. Maybe people were still asleep or had already gone somewhere. What on earth? Did something happen? A voice came from behind Adriana. She turned around and looked at the man. She recognized him at once. The man had recently taken a job as a janitor. The woman did not even know his name. And why should she? Most of the time, Adriana ran past him, not even noticing the man with the broom. The only thing that surprised her was the janitor's age. Adriana was used to seeing older people in that position. This one was about her age. Such people usually chose other jobs that were more prestigious and better paid. A neighbor once told Adriana that the new janitor had nowhere to live. He's practically homeless. And they provide the staff of the cabins. And that's kind of why the young guy joined the janitorial staff, to get at least a roof over his head. And no one knew why he was homeless at that age. The man did not look like an alcoholic or a marginalized person. He was trim, polite, neat. There was a lot of things in life. And now this janitor looked at a confused Adriana and waited for an answer. His calm gaze had a positive effect on the woman. She finally pulled herself together. It happened, Adriana admitted. I changed the faucet, but something went wrong. Now there's water spurting out of the wall. Niagara Falls. A little more and the lower floor will flood. What are we gonna do? I have no idea. Let's go take a look, just suggested the janitor. Adriana felt grateful to this man. And something else. A kind of relief. Finally, she was not alone with her problem now. She would get help. Adriana could feel it in the confident tone of her interlocutor. Together, they could do it. Water was already soaking the towel and plaid. A thin stream flowed from the bathroom into the hallway. Catastrophe stretched Adriana. Panic began to overtake her again. Did you shut off the water? The janitor hastily inquired. He had already managed to roll up the sleeves of his sweater and turn his pant leg. Of course, replied Adriana. I'm not quite there. Where are the valves in the toilet? The Bucks faucet flew, the man stated after a couple of seconds. The water isn't turned off, so it's flooded. So what to do? Adriana's voice sounded desperate. We have to put the tap back. You have new ones. Let's go on. Adriana and the janitor worked as a team. The woman handed her savior the parts of the crane. And the latter, despite the flow spurting from the wall, screwed on a new caterpillar. The stream gradually weakened. And when the tap was in place, it dried up. The job was done. The janitor came out of the bathroom soaking wet. But happy, he said everything. It's done. The only thing is, we'll have to call a plumber to change the faucet. I'm not sure I can do that. Adriana couldn't even put into words how grateful she was to him. She was smiling, and the janitor, meanwhile, was staring at her very intently. And then Adriana guessed she was as wet as he was. Thin homemade dress clung tightly to her figure. The woman was embarrassed. "I need to change," she said. "Do you need a dry towel?" "Wait a moment." Adriana hurried to her bedroom and locked herself inside. Then she pulled her wet dress off over her head and quickly changed into shorts and a t-shirt. For the janitor's savior, the woman grabbed a large terry towel and the very same Ethan sweater from the closet, the only manly thing she had left. "Here you go." She smiled at the man, handing him a towel. "Thank you," he replied, embarrassed. A few minutes ago, he looked like a real hero. Then the man was confidently screwing the faucet to the wall, fighting the flow of water pouring directly into his face. And now, for some reason, he got confused. "Thank you," smiled Adriana. "I do not know what I would do without you. Probably would have flooded the whole house. By the way, my name is Adriana." "William," the man introduced himself. Adriana looked at him more closely and suddenly realized that he was very handsome. Thoughtful, brown eyes, well-defined lips, jet black eyebrows, high cheekbones. The man's face was attractive and somewhat even aristocratic, high athletic. What can I say, physical work is good for the figure. William also had amazing palms, narrow with long fingers. The hands of a surgeon or a pianist, but certainly not of a janitor. "How about some hot tea or coffee after a cold shower?" Adriana asked. "Just change into that sweater. Yours is all wet." "Thank you, I won't say no." Right in front of Adriana, William pulled off the soaked sweater and pulled Ethan's sweater over his body. The woman managed to notice the scars on his back. Men. The long scars stood out in color against William's swarthy skin. And then they sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and cookies. "So why did you start changing the faucet yourself?" William wondered. "You should have waited for your husband. He would have had no trouble at all." "I don't have a husband," Adriana admitted. And for some reason she felt a kind of shame, a stupid feeling. But social protocol required a woman of 38 to be married, or at least divorced. And that sweater William was pulling on her sweater collar. "Ethan, it's just that, a reminder of the past." "I see," smiled William. Adriana thought there was a flicker of joy in his eyes. But sometimes it is better not to think about the past. "I know that. Do you like to travel?" William noticed the pictures on the shelf. Adriana posed in these pictures with the sights of the countries she'd been to. "I love Italy and Greece too, and I've been to Zatzve Castle. It's a wonderful place. There are many interesting castles in Germany in general." Adriana looked at the guest with her eyes wide open. He is a janitor, just a janitor. A man who, as they say, does not even have a place to live homeless. And yet he knew the places depicted in the photographs, and even assured that he had been there too. Strange. Adriana took a closer look at William. The man did not look like an outcast or a beggar. He behaved with dignity and spoke calmly and confidently. He spoke well and pleasantly. "And you?" Adriana was at a loss to formulate a question. You have to ask in such a way that the guest is not offended. "How did I become a janitor?" William guessed and smiled warmly at his companion. "Ask, do not be shy. There is nothing wrong with it. Yes, I'm really interested. But it's a sad story. I had my own business, ran into some very bad people, lost everything. It's a very ordinary story. Now I have to start everything from scratch. I used to work as a janitor in a neighboring town. Then, as the management company closed, they asked me to leave. I found a place here. The main thing for me was to be provided with a place to live. A wage of a janitor is so big that there is not enough money for rent. That's how I live." Adriana looked at William with her eyes wide open. What a tragedy to lose everything in the blink of an eye, and it's so easy to talk about it. "Yes, I'll be fine," William assured her. "I'll get back on my feet. I'll make up for everything. The main thing is not to be discouraged." They talked some more. As it turned out, William and Adriana had many things in common. The woman was happy to realize this. So did her guest, it seemed. Adriana didn't want to part with William at all, but he suddenly realized it was time for him to go to the facility. The man took a few more yards as a part-time job. I'm embarrassed to suggest that, but William hesitated at the front door. Adriana looked at him with desperate hope. Maybe we could go out tonight and see a movie or something. There's a new movie coming out, isn't there? You must have heard, Adriana assured him, and I was just about to go to it. I would love to go. William later confessed that it was not easy for him to decide to invite Adriana to the movies. The woman lived in a spacious apartment, clearly earned well, traveled a lot. All the furnishings of her home showed success. And here he is a janitor who has nothing. What kind of relationship could there be between them? But he was so drawn to this beautiful woman with huge, kind eyes and a warm smile that he made up his mind. William was ready to hear a cold, negative answer and to see contempt and even squeamishness in Adriana's eyes. But she was genuinely delighted at the invitation. It was incredible. It was as if a warm wave came over William. They went to the movies in the dark theater. William dared to take Adriana's hand. It was a very gentle, trusting gesture. The woman squeezed his fingers lightly as a sign that she didn't mind. She wanted more embraces of kisses, hot confessions, but she didn't even want to admit it to herself, because Adriana had just experienced a hard breakup and betrayal. She hasn't gotten over her relationship with Ethan yet, and Adriana doesn't know how to choose men. It's obvious. Everything in her life is proof of that. And here's a janitor with a suspicious past. Maybe he lied to her about these people's business. Maybe this William is some bandit himself and is hiding in a small town from the police? What was she going to get herself into? But looking into William's dark eyes, admiring his smile, Adriana understood. Right now, all that mattered to her was to be near this man. He has a special effect on her. It's something on a physical level. William walked her to the door of the porch. It was already dark. He stared into her eyes for a long time, as if deciding to do something, and Adriana waited. She felt like an 18-year-old girl and hoped, desperately hoping that he had done it. Maybe he knew from Adriana's eyes, or maybe he just couldn't help himself. William kissed her in his arms. Adriana felt happy. She wanted this moment to last forever. She literally forced the sensible, but unnecessary arguments against what was happening out of her head. "Shall we go up to my place?" asked Adriana to William when he stepped back to admire her face. Surely, the man clarified. Adriana nodded silently. They hadn't parted since then. William went to live with Adriana. She herself asked him to stay with her, and he gladly agreed. He didn't seem to want to leave Adriana either. His apartment building was on the first floor next door. Adriana had been there once before. A cramped, cozy room, a bed, a closet, and a laptop on the windowsill that replaced the chair. The woman also thought that if William flatly refused to live with her, she would gladly move in with him. Because the proverb, "With a sweetheart in the shack," is the wise words of life. Adriana didn't think she could ever fall in love again after betraying Ethan. And now, it seems, it did happen. Only in comparison to William did Adriana realize how selfish Ethan was. He supported her with words. That's right, he sympathized, he hugged her. But he didn't do anything for the woman he loved. Ethan had always only cared about his own comfort. William, on the other hand, was really trying for Adriana. He tried to make every moment of her life happy and pleasant. The woman felt this and appreciated it very much. For example, William could specially get up early to prepare for Adriana her favorite pancakes with cottage cheese. The woman would wake up to the aroma coming from the kitchen and smile even before she opened her eyes. It was so cozy and peaceful. She hadn't felt this way since her early childhood. Then William kissed his beloved, in a hurry to get to work. The janitor's day begins even after dark, and Adriana ate breakfast in peace and quiet, enjoying a delicious pastry, and rejoicing that she had such an attentive, caring, sensitive person. Of course, Adriana understood what their relationship looked like. A desperate woman with a broken heart who was almost 40 once again brought home an Alphonse. This time the option was even more original than Ethan. William was practically homeless. No place of his own, no money, no prospects. And yet he gave Adriana much more than she gave him. Next to William, the woman felt she was healing. Everything was filling with energy, becoming happier. Adriana didn't tell her friends and colleagues about the man she loved, although many noticed the changes happening to her and bombarded her with questions. But the woman remained silent. In the first time in her life, had time to make sure that happiness loves silence. And secondly, she was well aware of the reaction of friends. Of course, they would again begin to dissuade Adriana from making another mistake, call her a fool, convince her that William was unworthy of listening to her. It will be painful and unpleasant. Partly also because it is true. William's past and present do raise a lot of questions, the answers to which Adriana does not want to know yet. Who knows what's going to turn up? It is better to enjoy the moment of intimacy of this wonderful man, his gentle embrace, attention, and care. William looked at Adriana thoughtfully, warm and gentle. This is not to be played, guarded her from the cares of life and life. And when she once broke down, the car showed himself to be an excellent mechanic and fixed the car. In just half an hour. And where did you learn this? Adriana marveled. I had one of those in a previous life. A little sadly smiled William. Adriana, as always, tensed at the mention of William's past life. He did not particularly like to remember what had happened to him. Immediately became gloomy, withdrew into himself, frowned. Now a shadow came over the man's face. But he quickly pulled himself together, smiled beamingly, and offered to drive around the city to check the car in action. William and Adriana walked a lot, wandering through parks and squares, holding hands, discussing things. William always proved to be an erudite and interesting conversationalist. As he himself once admitted, he had two opposing higher educations. The first is a linguist. He got it right after high school, so to speak, at the behest of his heart. But then it turned out that you can't earn much in such a specialty. So William started his own business. That's why he got a second degree in economics, to be well versed in all the nuances and to keep things under control. It didn't help he smiled. The smile came out sad, as it always did when William reminisced about that life of his. Adriana tried to make a direct picture of her lover from these scrappy bits of information. She did not question him. She saw that William was uncomfortable talking about it and didn't want to pressure him. And she was afraid of hearing something that would disappoint her or turn her away from William. She was fine with everything, and she wasn't going to pry into a man's soul. He would tell her himself if he wanted to. But Adriana herself did not hide from William her long and unsuccessful affair with Ethan. You have no luck with men. Shook his head William. I'm quite a catch, aren't I? Adriana smiled and hugged him. At that moment, she thought that William was a real present. No matter what would happen next, he had come into her life just when she needed him most, and helped her cope with her longing. Made her stronger, only by William's side. Adriana realized how insincere Ethan had been to her. Amazing. It seemed that it was William who wasn't telling her about his past and hiding something from her. But Adriana saw it. The main thing is that he really loves her. Ethan finds it hard to admit it, but it seems that he was just creating the appearance of a warm relationship. Here her friends and colleagues were right. Ethan was only taking advantage of her. And then, when a more interesting, more profitable option loomed, he shamelessly ran away, leaving Adriana with a broken heart and unfulfilled hopes. One night Adriana felt ill. It was late, almost midnight. Her condition worsened suddenly. At first, she had a headache, but the woman thought it was from fatigue. Then suddenly, the joints began to break down and her back ached. So Adriana couldn't sit up. She crawled over the back of the couch, curled up, and covered herself with the plaid. It was in this state that William, who had returned from a night's work, found her. What's the matter with you? He worried. You look pale and tired. She'll be all right now. William went over to her and put his cool hand on her forehead. It felt good. You are on fire, William exclaimed. Where is your first aid kit? Have you got any antipyretic? No, sighed Adriana. She had recently gone through her closet and found that most of the medicine had expired. The medications went in the trash. There was almost nothing left in the medicine cabinet. and there certainly wasn't any antipyretics. "I'm hustling now, William. I'll go to the drugstore." 11 o'clock at night, Adriana reminded me. She was starting to get a big shiver. All the drugstores were already closed. She had to wait until morning. "She'll get over it somehow. I'm going to the convenience store." She reminded me a lot of Adriana, and the car at the service is no big deal. "I'll walk. Just hang in there." William slammed the door. Adriana heard his hurried footsteps. He walked easily down the stairs. William, about to walk a few blocks. In the freezing November rain, and all for Adriana, to relieve her. Well, look at that. Her memory servilely slipped her a picture from the past. She also suddenly felt ill. Again in the night, the pills were not in the medicine cabinet. Ethan was home. He realized that Adriana had a fever and moved away from her so that she wouldn't get infected, and expressed his sympathy. He advised her to drink more. He promised that in the morning he would go down to the pharmacy located in their house and buy medicine. Ethan didn't even think about getting to the distant 24-hour pharmacy, though he could have driven to it. He slept in the living room that night so he wouldn't get an infection from Adriana. And she was alone in the heat, tossing her bed, hoping to be alive in the morning. She felt so bad that words can't describe it. In the morning, the fever broke and the crisis was over. Adriana felt better. Sure, there was some weakness, but it was nothing compared to what she'd been through. So you see, it was nothing serious. Ethan was relieved. The body took care of itself, so Ethan went to work with a light heart, leaving the dirty dishes on the table after breakfast. And once Adriana had not yet understood that a loving person could not behave in this way, it only became apparent in contrast to William. William returned an hour later. It wasn't a long walk to the drugstore. In his hands was a bag containing not only medicine. He had also picked up some fruit for Adriana at the convenience store. "Do you need vitamins now?" Adriana then felt a pleasant warmth spread throughout her body, and she could hardly hold back the tears that came to her eyes. William's care. It was so touching and so priceless. Adriana recovered quickly, and no one knows what helped more: the medicine, delivered on time, or the emotions that William gave her. 6 months had passed since William and Adriana had met. Those were the happiest months of the woman's life. She was simply bathed in love and acceptance. With joy and gratitude, she accepted the care of her loved one and took great pleasure in taking care of him herself. Happiness was only overshadowed by the fact that she could not tell her loved ones about this relationship because they would simply not understand her. Yes, William himself did not really want to get to know Adriana's friends. He was fine with things as they were, but they both knew it couldn't go on like this forever. That was what was frightening. Adriana was also frightened by William's past and that her lover was an honest, kind, noble man. She was sure of it. But what if anything had happened to him? What if someone or something from that life came back and took William away from her? Could Adriana survive such a blow? Adriana felt herself growing more and more attached to William. She enjoyed just watching him. Sometimes she would purposely park in a nearby yard and watch her beloved, methodically sweeping the paths burying. Trees painting fences, nimble precise movements, a focused face. William's hands clearly grew, from the right place. At night, William would fumble in his sleep, mumbling incoherent sentences and incomprehensible words. Adriana knew. At those moments, her lover dreamed of episodes from the past. Something scary, unpleasant, and frightening. But in the morning, William would get up with his usual smile. The nightmares remained somewhere far away. Before Adriana was again a cheerful, energetic man, her favorite man. After 6 months of relationship, Adriana began to notice that William became more thoughtful and sad. He often withdrew into himself. He liked to be alone. The woman was afraid of these changes. What was going on? Maybe William was bored with her. But no, he seemed to still look at her with love and tenderness. That's not something you can play, of course. Adriana asked her lover questions. He invariably avoided answering or changed the subject or made jokes. But something was bothering him, and very much so. Adriana saw it. She could almost read William's mind, and she felt that his soul was not in place. Most likely, it had something to do with his mysterious past, or maybe it was just her. Maybe there was something wrong with Adriana herself. Why else wouldn't her personal life work out? One day, she decides to have a frank conversation. "What's going on?" Straight up, Adriana asked William. "I can feel you. I can see that you are drifting away. I am doing something wrong." William looked at his companion, so that she lost all doubts at once. In that look there was so much love, so much tenderness, and yet hidden, carefully hidden sadness. "No, you didn't." William hugged Adriana, held her close to him. She felt loved and protected again. It was always like this when she found herself in his strong arms. "Yes, I do have new problems right now. I can't talk about them yet, and there's no reason to. It's all solvable. Don't worry about it." Adriana really wanted to believe that it was true. She was not in the habit of asking William about his affairs. She felt that it was unpleasant for him, and sometimes even painful. And she also knew that when the time came, he would explain it to her himself. In the meantime, excessive curiosity could destroy their fragile happiness. It was good that William did not know her friends and relatives. Surely by now they would have criticized her for getting involved with an Alphonse again, and probably with a bandit too. Who else would hide their past so thoroughly? You can't explain it to others. You can't prove that William is the smartest, kindest, most sensitive, caring man Adriana had ever met. The woman knew that he was a good man and would never hurt anyone. It was just that William was clearly caught in some difficult situation, and right now he was trying to get out of it. And yet the change is clearly taking place with her beloved. Adriana was troubled. Something was troubling him. William was not himself in front of Adriana, trying to smile and behave as usual. But Adriana saw everything, noticed everything. And then her health began to fail. A strange weakness. Flutters in front of her eyes. A strange tingling sensation in her stomach. Adriana even made an appointment with a doctor. He ordered a lot of tests and gave a list of specialists which should visit. William supported his beloved. He was very worried about Adriana, even though she assured him that nothing serious could happen to her. Well, some kind of avitaminosis, she probably smiled. "It happens. Take some vitamins, she'll be fine." That morning, Adriana had to excuse herself from work until noon. An appointment at the women's clinic was scheduled for the morning. Adriana went to the specialist with the results of the tests. The doctor studied them long and carefully and asked the patient all kinds of questions. Adriana patiently answered, wondering what this had to do with her problem. And then there was the examination on the chair. Adriana almost fell off it when she heard the doctor's verdict. "Oh, you're pregnant here, and it's 10 weeks. How could you not have noticed before?" Adriana still couldn't grasp the meaning of those words. Could it be a mistake? She'd been told a long time ago that she couldn't have children. After that botched operation, Adriana took it hard, but eventually she got used to it. And then suddenly this. The woman couldn't understand her emotions. A wave of conflicting feelings overwhelmed her. Joy, fear, surprise, disbelief. It all even made her eyes darken. Then she sat in front of the doctor, who wrote her prescriptions and referral to take vitamins, do an ultrasound, take the tests on the list. After leaving the office, Adriana sank down on the couch next to the exit. She wanted to catch her breath, to come to her senses, to think about the news properly. The whole world had turned upside down for her. A few minutes ago, she would be a mother. How Adriana had dreamed of it once. And now she has a baby living and growing under her heart. Her and William's baby. Adriana finally allowed herself to smile. This is happiness. It's a great joy and good fortune. That it has turned out this way. They will have a real family now. The opinion of others does not care about it from a high bell tower. William will be a wonderful father to their baby, and the joyful news of it will probably give him strength and drive the sadness out of his dark eyes. William, hurry home. I'm sure he's just now returning from his morning cleaning. The next outing is in an hour and a half. It would be great to tell him everything in person, not over the phone, to see the surprise and joy in the eyes of a loved one. And waiting until the evening is too long. Adriana won't last that long. The apartment greeted the woman with silence. William had not yet returned or had left for another part-time job. Adriana entered the bedroom. Something was wrong. The closet door in the clothes closet was ajar, I guess. William was getting ready for work in a hurry. The woman went to the closet to close it and was dumbfounded. The shelves of William's clothes were empty. What was going on at all? Adriana, of course, figured out what was going on. Anyone would have guessed right away, but she was still trying to think of some other explanation for herself. A life-saving version that looked less violent than the truth didn't work. So William packed up and left, just as Ethan had been abandoned again, betrayed again. Adriana's worry darkened her eyes and made her dizzy. And then she remembered that she had to control herself for the sake of the baby. The baby is small, fragile, still so vulnerable. She could not lose him. Adriana took a few deep breaths. It helped to clear her head. So William left, one might even say ran away, taking advantage of Adriana's absence. If it hadn't been for that, if it hadn't been for his haste, it might have been that William had been forced to leave by some circumstance from the past. But as it was, he just ran away. Not even willing to explain himself, picked a moment while Adriana was out of the house. Is she so unpleasant to people? Why does everyone run away from her? William, that's very hard to believe. It is impossible to play the love and care with which he surrounded Adriana. The woman had thought so before, but now she doubted it. It looked like William was faking it after all. She was being used again. Again, Adriana trusted a man, and again she had been betrayed. That's a hard thing to forgive and get over. Adriana knew for sure. Now she could never trust anyone again. And she didn't need those traitors anymore. Now she had her baby boy, her greatest joy and comfort. Adriana would be fine. A son or daughter will grow up alone. She won't be the first, she won't be the last. She has everything for this apartment, a good job. And most importantly, a great desire to give the baby love and care. There's no problem with that, except that I feel bitter and resentful. Yes, it wasn't. Adriana imagined in her dreams the day she would find out she was pregnant. She thought she would just be glowing with the long-awaited joy, but now the woman sits on the bed, wrapping her arms around her legs in her lap. And barely holding back her tears, she needs to take a sedative. Yes, by all means. It was not enough to harm the baby by worrying. Adriana got out of bed and wandered to the kitchen. On the way, she wondered if William had accidentally left any of his belongings behind, like Ethan the other day. And she really hoped the man had taken it all, because she didn't want to hug the sweater, the man she once loved, and water it down with tears anymore. No, the woman intended to start a new life with a clean slate. On the kitchen table, Adriana immediately noticed his sheet of paper. The paper was scribbled in William's neat handwriting. So he had left her a note after all. A whole message, by all appearances, not just, sorry, goodbye. Do not look in Adriana's heart. Hope flared up. The woman tried to extinguish the feeling, so that later she would not be greatly disappointed. But nothing came of it. Adriana grabbed the sheet of paper and dug her eyes into the flat lines. I need to leave as I have lived these 4 years. It is impossible to exist any longer. If I was fine before, now I have you. It changes a lot of things. Thank you for your love, care, acceptance, trust. You did not pester me with questions, did not take offense at the fact that I do not tell much about myself, even though I have the right to do so. Tactfulness, respect. I appreciate that in you, as well as many other things. Those qualities are not often found in people. I have to leave, for a while, I hope, but anything can happen. So just in case, I'll say it again, I love you. You're not just a stunningly beautiful woman. There are a lot of beauties, but I've never met one so sincere, gentle, sweet. I thought there was no such thing. It was love at first sight. I noticed you before that fateful crane accident happened. It must have been fate that created the occasion for us to meet. I admired you from afar. I saw you coming home in the evenings, tired and sad, always sad, even when you were laughing and talking to someone. I so wanted to know the reason for that sadness, and to remove it, and make your eyes shine with joy. I was able to see your smile, hear your voice, breathe in the fragrance of your hair. That in itself is happiness. When I hold you, I feel strong, needed, loved, almost all-powerful. You love me too. I feel it, accept it as I am a homeless, practically beggar with a suspicious past. I didn't think this could happen to me in my life, just as you have had many disappointments. Besides, it's not a good time for me to meet like this. And yet fate has sent me you. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. It's very difficult to leave now. I don't know when I'll see you again, or if I'll see you at all. But I want you to know, closer than you are, I have no one else on this earth. You are the whole world to me. I have a dream. I've imagined it so often that I'm almost certain. Everything will work out for me. We will make it. I see us in a cozy little house with a big garden. We live in a small seaside town. Beautiful, clean streets, beautiful scenery. We walk to the end of the park, which begins just behind our house. And we are on the beach. Sometimes we meet the sunrise on the beach or admire a stunning sunset. Sometimes we just sit in our arms and admire the waves. If everything goes right, the dream will come true very soon. And now more about where I disappeared to. I told you almost nothing about my past. Partly because it's hard for me to talk about it. Besides, I didn't want you to be touched by any of the dirt that had fallen on me. I won't name specific places and people, simply because the note might fall into the wrong hands. It would probably be difficult to verify all this. But I'm not going to hide or embellish anything now. This is a frank account of an honest story. Confession. I guess even I was living in another city. I had a wife, an apartment, an education. My parents died early. I was in university at the time, so I had to make my own way in life. I had a friend, Liam. We'd known each other since we were kids. We grew up next door, walking up and down. We went to the same school. I felt like I could trust him more than I could trust myself. Liam had been there for me through the hardest times. And when my parents died, and when I almost lost my apartment, and when I got seriously ill, my friend shared his joy with me. For example, he was the one I asked to be a witness at my wedding to Kelly. At that time, we already had a small business. We opened a small car service, but the profit was quite good at that time. Time passed, the business grew. We already had a chain of service stations. The profits were increasing. We were getting rich. I graduated in economics to keep our business under control. Liam was a lawyer, so we were covered from every angle. But that's what I thought at the time. And then Liam decided it was time for us to expand some more. So he borrowed a large sum of money at low interest. But he went not to a bank, but to a local oligarch with a questionable past. When Liam consulted me about it, I told him right away that it was very dangerous to do business with such people. Liam persuaded me, recounting the merits of the deal, saying that a bank loan would be much more expensive. But I stood my ground. In the end, Liam had already done everything the way he had planned. Initially, he signed a contract with those people, but he slipped this document for me to sign. I signed it without looking. I trusted Liam like I trusted myself, and I certainly didn't expect such a trick from him. Then I had the opportunity to carefully read this very contract. The loan was taken against the collateral of my property, and the debt was to be returned to me. The debt itself and the interest on arrears. The interest on the loan itself was indeed minimal. But if I broke the deadline, the amount would increase to an unbelievable amount. Liam's name was not mentioned in the agreement, and neither were the details of our company. It turned out that I had taken out a loan for myself for my own needs. Liam had just made sure of that. So he thought that everything would run smoothly, and I wouldn't even think anything of it. It didn't. We had expanded the business, but due to an unfortunate set of circumstances, we took a big loss. It didn't work out. There was nothing to pay back the debt. That's when it all came out. Liam didn't explain anything. I guess he couldn't look me in the eye after all that. He packed his bags and flew to Turkey with his wife. In a hurry. But the people of the oligarch, whom I owed money to, told me everything. They threatened me with interest. But they were told that they were going to take all of my property, a large apartment in the city center, a summer house in the village, both of my cars in exchange for the debt. But also all the money from the account, of course. All that I had built up for so long. And this amount did not cover the debt and the interest on it. The worst thing is that the debt was growing every day. Simply put, they put me on a meter. I was given time to solve this problem for a month. But what could I do? All hope was in Liam, and he was in another country. It was impossible to get in touch with him. Still, once I got him on the phone, he mumbled something indecipherable, saying he didn't know how to help me. He offered to pay me my share of the firm's authorized capital, but it's just pennies. They would not have helped me in any way. And we had no profits at that time. It was a loss. And I realized that I wasn't going to get any support from Liam. Yeah, it was clear. He betrayed me, set me up, and it was all for the money. It hurt to know that I was left with nothing but a huge debt. But what made it even harder was that the man I thought was my brother had turned out to be the real traitor. I felt alone, betrayed by no one. There was no hope for Kelly. She played the part of the perfect wife when her spouse was successful. But I always realized she was with me for the money. Did I love her? That's a tough question. I proposed to her because I wanted a beautiful woman by my side. Kelly, she's unbelievably beautiful. She was a model when she was young, so I fell for her looks. Naturally, Kelly left me as soon as the problem started. I can't say I was surprised or upset. The creditors kept up. They threatened me almost every day, and then they went from threats to actions. As I remember now, I was lying there in the early morning, beaten up in a field outside of town. They drove me there. My whole body was aching. My face was flooded with blood. I lay there and realized I had to run before it was too late. These people will stop at nothing, and I didn't want to die, no matter what. I didn't want to die at all. I returned home, washed my face, gathered some things, and went to the train station. I didn't even know where to go. I got tickets for the nearest train. Fate itself had determined my destination. It turned out to be a small provincial town. I walked its dusty, quiet, juvenile streets, and I felt safe. For the first time in a long time, I talked on the street with the locals and found out that I could get a job as a security guard at a factory. Not only were the wages not bad by the standards of this city, but they also provided accommodation in a small hut. And a new life began for me. I even liked it. The work is not dusty. The people were nice, a quiet, measured life without stress. There I rested both morally and physically and thought about my situation and realized that so far there was no way out. Let everything go as it goes. But I knew, always felt, understood. No one would just leave me alone. And so they did. One day they found me again beaten and threatened me. Again, they demanded to pay back the debt I never took. It was impossible to explain to them that I had been set up. They had a document with my signature on it. Nothing else mattered. I managed to escape, and it so happened that I hitchhiked to this city. I needed a job with accommodation again, and I found it. I got a job as a janitor in your yard. That's where I met you. You know the rest. This time they found me much faster than that time. We had a serious conversation. They can do anything to keep you safe from them. I'm leaving. I can't let them know I have a significant other, because these people can use you as bait. Do you understand? I can't let that happen. For the first time, I was glad that few people know about our relationship. That's real happiness. Good luck. And I headed back to my hometown. I need to have a serious talk with Liam. I know our firm is thriving again. Liam is wealthy enough to pay back that debt. I will make him do it, no matter how much he resists. I didn't care before. All I wanted was to forget about the past. There were so many bad things in it. The betrayal of loved ones, the losses, the fears, the seclusion, the quiet. Life was good enough for me. It was as if I had become invisible. No name, no age, no roots. But then I met you. And now I want to aspire to something, to achieve something again. To do something for you, for us. To be able to live in peace, without hiding from anyone. Now I can't afford to spend the rest of my life running from my pursuers. Going back to my hometown is dangerous. But I simply have no other choice. I have to see Liam, I have to get my name back. And then we'll be together again. and I'll finally be able to fulfill my dream. Adriana found herself sitting right on the floor. She hadn't noticed how, in the process of reading William's letter, she slid right down the wall. What an eventful day, how much news, how many revelations. My head was spinning. Adriana immediately believed every word written in the message. On the one hand, she felt joy and relief. William loves her, he is not a traitor, not a coward, not a liar. Only now Adriana's heart was clenched with an icy hand of anxiety for the man she loved. William is very much at risk. Anything could happen to him, and she can't even do anything to help him. And then there's the baby. What a pity she did not have time to tell William the good news. Perhaps he would have been more careful, knowing he was going to be a father. The days of anxiety and doubt dragged on. Adriana waited every day for news from William, but he did not show himself. If William had at least written the name of his hometown, Adriana would certainly have rushed there. I guess that's why he left the destination a secret. He didn't want Adriana to take any chances. The woman flinched every time she heard footsteps on the landing. Wasn't that William coming back? She rushed to the phone. As soon as the bell rang on the street, she looked intently at passersby to see if anyone was following her. Maybe there was a glimpse of William somewhere among the people. But all was quiet and calm, as always. Adriana tried to distract herself, went to work, started at home a general cleaning, and then a mini repair. Nothing helped. Her thoughts were constantly on William. She tried to imagine where he was and what was happening to him. Her fertile imagination was apt to conjure up scary pictures. Adriana saw her beloved lying tied up in a dark cellar, or beaten bloody in some dense forest, or without breathing at all. At the bottom of a lake, it was frightening, very scary. Adriana held on only for the sake of the baby that was actively growing and developing under her heart. A month and a half had passed since William disappeared. Adriana had missed him so much that she was in almost physical pain. She sorely missed his hugs and his voice, especially now that she was expecting a baby boy. Adriana needed William's care and support, and let him keep working as a janitor and hiding. She would hide with him. No big deal. The important thing was that William was there for her. The rest is such trifles. That evening, Adriana returned from work later than usual. The parking spaces in the yard were already full, so she had to leave the car behind the house and walk around a bit. As the woman approached the driveway, her native voice called out to her. Adriana could not even believe her ears at first, she thought, and confessed. It had happened more than once. During her separation from William, she often saw her beloved in passing men. And each time her heart at first fluttered with joy, and then shrank with disappointment. Adriana turned around and met William's eyes. It really was him. William was sitting behind the wheel of a brand new SUV. Cheerful, healthy, alive. He jumped out of the car in 2 strides, reached Adriana and raked her in an armful. The woman, hugged him by the shoulders, pressed her whole body to him and cried. She had held back her tears, her emotions, for so long that she simply could not react to his appearance. Otherwise, you're doing fine. Adriana finally asked the question that worried her. Yes, William nodded. As the saying goes, there was no luck. Yes, misfortune helped. If they had not found me, so I would have been hiding. And you'll be all right with me now. Yes, of course I can now. Now I can finally be frank with you. They went up to the apartment. Adriana held William's hand the whole time. It seemed to her that if she let go of his warm palm, he would disappear. Because this was all just a dream inspired by Adriana's dreams. How much did I miss you? William ran his hand over Adriana's cheek. What do you think about moving to the sea? Do you remember that dream I had? I wrote to you about it. Can we afford it? Now? Yes, and William began his story. Adriana listened carefully to every word and understood more and more clearly now their life would change, and definitely for the better. William went straight to Liam. The firm that had once been created by their combined efforts was thriving. The man knew this for sure. He was constantly interested in the news of his town and Liam's business, too, of course. It was easy to find the information he needed on the internet. William was planning a serious conversation with a former friend and companion. For years, William thought it was useless. Liam showed his true face. There was no whiff of nobility or honesty there. Besides, William was hurt and disgusted to even meet the man who had done this to him. And this after they had been considered almost brothers for years. But now there is Adriana in William's life. He can no longer live like a mole in a hole. He doesn't want to hide from creditors, to whom he owes nothing, to move from place to place to get away from the chase. That's not for him now. William has a very different dream: to live with the woman he loves in a comfortable house near the sea, to live a quiet, measured work, maybe even take the children from the orphanage into the family. Adriana admitted to him that it is unlikely that she will ever be able to become a mother. Not a problem. And for that, William needed to sort out his creditors and take his share of the firm's profits. Accordingly, without talking to Liam, there was no way around it. William returned to his hometown and had mixed feelings. On the one hand, most of his life had been spent here. All sorts of memories are associated with this place. On the other hand, William once had to run away from here, a beaten devotee. The man walked through the familiar streets. A lot had changed in 4 years. The city had become better cared for, more decorated, brighter. Some places were hard to recognize at all. William's feet led him to the building that housed the firm's headquarters. Liam must be there now. William didn't venture inside. Who knows how the former partner would behave? He had a guilty conscience. Consequently, Liam is afraid of William, probably thinking that he wants revenge. He will also call for security guards or even call the creditors to deal with an illegal guest. The conversation may not work out, and scared, Liam will disappear again. He would fly to Turkey, Egypt, or somewhere else to wait it out, just like that time William decided to wait for Liam outside, sitting on a bench where he had a clear view of the porch. Somehow the man felt calm and relaxed. He didn't have to wait long. Liam appeared on the porch in the company of a young boy. They talked for a while and said goodbye. The boy walked toward the bus stop, and Liam headed for the parking lot. William jumped up and followed him. Liam. William called out to his friend as he was about to open his car door. They were alone in the parking lot. They couldn't have had a better time to talk. Liam turned around at the familiar voice. Surprise flashed in his eyes, then fright. William expected Liam to try to slip quickly into the driver's seat and rush away from the man he'd once framed and whose life he'd essentially ruined. But he stared silently at William approaching him and didn't even try to run away. "We need to talk," said Liam. When William approached him, "Oh dear, that's exactly what I wanted to tell you." They went to a coffee shop near the office. They were quiet on their way. At a table, Liam finally got to talking. Turns out he'd been confused all these years. He blamed himself for doing that to his best friend. But William could not help because he was afraid. Afraid of poverty, of revenge, of creditors, of banishment. Nor did he know how to look for a former companion. William listened to Liam without interrupting. Strangely enough, pity for his companion stirred in his soul. He looked so confused, so weak and unhappy. "Recently, I found out that I was sick, seriously ill." Liam continued. "The doctors say there is little chance of recovery. No amount of money will help. The only possibility is a miracle, and I understand why I'm being punished. It's so obvious." Liam tried to find William to help, but there was no sign of him. The man even went to a detective agency. But William is very good at covering his tracks. But that didn't stop the creditors from finding him. "I would have found you." "I would have," Liam assured me, looking at his friend with eyes full of remorse. "But then, by some miracle, you showed up, and now all is well." William smiled, tucking Adriana behind the ear, a strand of long hair dislodged. Liam paid off his debtors, gave me back my share of the assets, offered to continue the business together. But I refused. No, not out of resentment. I just don't feel comfortable talking to him anymore. "Let's go to the sea and I'll start again." "We'll start, if you don't mind." "To the sea." Adriana stretched out dreamily. Of course she didn't mind. The sea is good. Sea air is good for the baby. William, the child, didn't know anything yet. He looked questioningly at Adriana, and she smiled at him. Very soon, Adriana would finally tell her beloved the happy news. He was not the only one with something to tell today.